Without further ado, I want to bring in Guy Taylor. He's the national security editor at the Washington Times and the host of the Threat Status podcast newsletter. Guy, welcome to the show.
Sean, it's so good to be here. How are you?
I'm great. I was drawn to something you wrote in your newsletter today, and I want to read it for everyone. The federal government has issued its most thorough verdict yet about the drone sightings in New Jersey in recent weeks. Some are law enforcement, some are commercial flights, some are hobbyists, and many are actually airplanes, helicopters, or even stars mistaken for drones, the government said. This is in your newsletter today. The joint statement from the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Defense, the Federal Aviation Community, came after feds say that they deployed drone detecting technology and trained visual observers to get to the bottom of the mysterious flights. Officials confirmed there had been drone sightings over military bases, but they said they weren't worrying, said such incidents are not new. Guy, I don't even know where to start with this. Hey, people spy on us all the time. It's not new. How troubling is that?
It's a little bit troubling. I want to point out that the Pentagon, Patrick Ryder, the spokesman for the Pentagon, actually went a little bit further in a briefing on Tuesday night this week, where he basically said there's no indication that these things that are being spotted and filmed on cell phone cameras in New Jersey and other places on the East Coast are in any way tied to some secret U.S. military experiment or research. That, this is just what the FBI said in its joint statement. It could be a mixture of airplanes. It could be things mistaken for drones, and it could be some commercial drones. I think what we're seeing right now, given the gravity of this and the national security implications and all of the questions around it, is this is the federal government sort of buying time in recent days. It doesn't resolve the wider issue, which is that there's been this preponderance of basically unidentified flying objects, UFOs, over areas of the U.S. East Coast. And instead of jumping into conspiracy theories about that, I think there's some really sober, realistic ideas that we got to think about here. The first is how this story that's just snowballed because of social media, how did that happen? There's a kind of runaway train element to it without anyone in the government stepping forward until it was already a massive national story. So that's a bit of a problem politically for the Biden administration. I think also another simple idea that we got to think about here is that Americans are now living in a country saturated with commercial, private, and government operated drones. And the regulation of that current reality is inadequate right now at the federal, state, and local levels. There's a degree of chaos happening. And I think this whole situation is kind of a wake-up call. It's almost like frogs in a pot of water. Suddenly, a few of the frogs, in this case, thousands of people with cell phone cameras in New Jersey, are sounding the alarm that, hey, wait a minute, the water's getting really warm here. It's boiling. There are SUV-sized drones flying all over the place, and our government barely has a handle on it, really doesn't have a handle on it. I think we also saw the House Intelligence Committee got a classified briefing on Tuesday this week from FBI and DOJ, other federal law enforcement officials, after which we saw several lawmakers in the House and the Senate suddenly awake to the fact that state and local municipalities apparently lack any legal authority to interdict mystery drones or just take them down somehow, whether with their own drones or shoot them down. Federal agencies currently do have this authority, but they haven't shot any of these mystery drones down. So that adds a layer to what are we really looking at here? We did see outgoing Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer Tuesday this week say, we got to have a bill on the table immediately to give authority to state municipalities, state police to interdict, take down one of these things and not halt doing it, which has been an issue with this. And then finally, Sean, I think another really sober idea here for Americans to think about is we're in this space of futuristic drone technology right now, and it's advancing very rapidly in the private sector. There are companies out there, US companies and a handful of foreign companies that are making drones with AI brains that can fly without a human at the joystick, drones that can literally fly without GPS. They've got sensors, AI sensors on them that can read and detect the airspace and make movements to hide if they're being chased. That technology exists now. You could read about it. We've actually had a piece last week in our daily threat status newsletter that goes with our podcast, talking about a company called Shield AI that's partnered with Palantir, two emergent defense contracting companies that are making drones that can circumnavigate the earth without GPS. So we're entering a new phase with this drone discussion, and there's more questions than answers, basically.
Well, Guy, the key word that you used in that description initially was could. It could, I mean, this is the government that you were referring to. It could be commercial. It could be, military. It could, the idea that they don't know, and yet at the same time are telling us that there's no threat, doesn't comport. If you don't know what it is, how do you not know that it's a threat?
Yeah, well, I think this is what was kind of interesting with President-elect Trump's press conference earlier this
Yes.
week, where he pretty much called out the federal government and said, "How have you not taken one of these things down? How is it possible that the Pentagon doesn't know, if they are commercial drones, they're flying out of some warehouse somewhere, identify where that is, take the warehouse." And he's also saying, provocative things like, look, the feds know more than they're saying right now. And there's certainly a feeling in the mainstream media. I mean, we saw the Associated Press hammering the Pentagon yesterday, trying to get some kind of clarity or a statement on the record from Pat Ryder. They're like, look, are you really saying that the Pentagon is not doing this and has no idea what it is beyond this vague statement that, well, it could be some commercial drones, there might be some police drones, there might be some people mistaking stars, and there's a lot of small airplanes flying around at night. We need a situation where someone has the authority in as little violent with as little violence as possible to take one of these things out of the sky and examine it and then tell the
Yes.
American people what it is.
By the way, is it your understanding? I mean, I'm glad you referenced President Trump's comments there at his press conference. What I was told afterwards is that part of the reason he was so cagey is that the Biden administration is not granting him security briefings.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm kind of two minds on that because I've had sources tell me that they're offering and he doesn't want to take them. So I think there's always a politicization that goes on in the
Yeah.
transition over what is he being told and what isn't he. And maybe he does want to hear more and he feels like it's not coming fast enough, so he throws a
Or he
jab
doesn't
out there
trust
like
them.
that. Or he doesn't trust them. Overall though, Sean, I thought the transition process could be a lot rockier than it is. I think that you're getting generally positive statements that
Right.
finally the different disclosure papers have been signed and there's action in place on various fronts and national security. And then it's just a matter of getting through the holidays here and into January. And you've got an administration. Like, this is what's so interesting about Trump. It's his second term, and he's coming in clearly with momentum where he wants the
Right.
nominations moving quickly so that we can get past this back and forth of are they sharing information or not.
All right. So I am a co-host of this show in the morning on my YouTube channel called The Morning Meeting. We invite
Mm.
people to come on, ask their questions, share their insights. There was a gentleman this morning who claims to be a drone expert from Idaho. He came on the show and he poked a ton of holes in the government statement. And the bottom line is he was talking about how the fact that they note they're sending visual observers. He was sort of questioning why, that's stupid at night. You're staring up there thinking somehow you're going to figure it out. But the bottom line is, this is what he said that I found shocking and scary. The government is unable to protect us at this moment from these drones. And he specifically referenced the inauguration and said the dirty little secret is they can't protect us from big events. He cited an NFL game. He cited an airport where they've been closing. They closed them down. The NFL game was paused. And he said, the dirty secret the government doesn't want you to know right now is that they cannot protect you, especially at big events like the inauguration. Do you share the assessment right now that the government not only doesn't know what they are, but has no ability to protect us?
I do. And I'm not going to sit here and just call for bigger government and more regulation, but clearly, as I've said, we're in a changing space in the drone landscape right now. There are more of them, there are more sophisticated, there are more private actors. Is there even cohesion around what different state police in different states have on hand? Is there a clear list of what the assets are? Number one. Number two, I'll tell you kind of an interesting story. Last week or week and a half ago, I was at the Reagan National Defense Forum, just north of Los Angeles, Simi Valley. At you may have been to this before, right? It's at the Reagan Presidential Library. Amazing event where you get all these Pentagon officials and contractors together. And there's a stealth fighter, an old stealth fighter on a pole outside the library with an amazing view of the mountains outside of Simi Valley. And while people were standing at the start of the Reagan National Defense Forum, a SUV-sized drone flew within eyesight of this scene, and people actually got a little bit of, it was daytime, got a little bit of cell phone footage of it. I didn't, and I haven't, so I can't offer it, but I saw it on a few other people's phones. It looked like it was a piloted drone, but here we are at a gathering of like the top US security officials at a presidential library, and nobody seemed to have an explanation as to what was that. It just kind of came and went by, and I've seen no press reporting on it. So yeah, I'm concerned that there could be some kind of an incident. If you go back as well 5 or 6 years, you'll remember when President-elect Trump was in office the first time around. There was also an attempted drone strike, an attempted assassination of Venezuelan
Yes,
socialist
that was what this
strongman
Idaho guy
Nicolas
brought up as
Maduro.
well. Yeah.
Yeah, so imagine that technology advanced dramatically in 5 years. We're talking about an accelerated advanced technology space, tons of companies working on this, lots of products out there without much regulation. The Pentagon is trying through you've heard of the replicator program, which is to try and accelerate the mass production of drones, advanced drones that can be used by US forces. But it's a space that's not very regulated.
Well, the one point that this gentleman this morning made is that in each of the circumstances, the Venezuelan thing, the NFL thing, and the airport situation, in every one of those cases, they still haven't figured out who the drone operator is.
That's right. I think some of that has to do with where we're going with advanced artificial intelligence computer chips that are in the brains of these drones. We're not talking about some sentient computer that can do these things. We're not there yet, right? But we are talking about drones that can read the environment and make moves without somebody in a room somewhere miles away making all of the movements. That's the stage that we're getting to. So I think until the government is able to take one of these things down and figure out exactly what it is and get to this story's not going away. It's just going to continue to grow. And I think you're going to maybe see some government action to try and address what the capabilities are of local and state law enforcement to get out in front of federal law enforcement if you have a situation like we've had in New Jersey in the past month.
Guy, I got about 60 seconds left with you. Let me just ask you this. TikTok's fate right now, supposedly they're going to get sold off. They have to vanquish their U.S. interest by, I think it's January 19th. The inauguration's obviously the 20th. At that press conference, we mentioned President Trump said he had a, quote, soft spot for TikTok. I believe it still is a national security threat. Based on what you know, what's the future of TikTok look like?
It's a great question. I interviewed Raja Krishnamurthy for our Threat Status podcast. It was actually a video a couple of months ago. He's one of the Democrats that authored the bill to force a sale of TikTok from ByteDance, a Chinese company that's basically tied to the Ministry of State Security, Chinese intelligence. And, he was hopeful that there could be an awakening, an awareness on both parties and across the American public that the U.S. government should do something. But look, who's going to actually make it so that you can no longer get TikTok on your phone without it becoming a massive First Amendment issue? It's going to be Google and Apple, right? So does the government have the appetite? Does the coming Trump administration have the appetite to try and muscle those companies? And also, does it have the back channel diplomatic capability to perhaps engineer a sale of TikTok
Right.
to a buyer, perhaps someone who's got big business in China. I'm thinking Elon Musk. I think that that's on a lot of people's minds, but this is a difficult case. And I think it's just going to be big in the headlines because there's now a TikTok Supreme Court case coming. TikTok is challenging it. But I'm with you, Sean, personally. I've been writing about this at Threat Status in our newsletter all the time, daily almost, which is the fact that TikTok is like heroin for young people. I mean,
Right,
you and I
right.
didn't get Instagram until we were grown-ups. And anybody who's got kids knows it's basically like
Right,
heroin for young people. I mean, they
right,
get sucked right into it. And it's not, should there be government regulation? A lot of these things come down
right.
to, can you have effective government regulation without politicizing it to a point and to address a foreign adversary that
Yeah,
owns this thing? And there's clear documentation that this platform is tied back to Chinese intelligence. So
right.
you got disinformation operations happening. I think the TikTok thing is, it's gonna be something we're all talking about in the next few months.
Agreed. Guy Taylor, we'll put the link to Threat Status, your newsletter there at the Washington Times in the notes for the show on YouTube, etc. Thanks for joining
Awesome.
us. Really appreciate it, guys. Listen, tomorrow, amazing panel breaks down all the information, plus Friday, Victor Davis Hanson. I've got some great info on the inaugural, all sorts of things. Again, I can't get you tickets. I can explain how you might be able to get them. Go to SeanSpicer.com. Sign up for the newsletter. I would appreciate it if you want to become a VIP member or gift it to someone. What a Christmas gift or a Hanukkah gift to give to somebody. Give them my newsletter. You can do that all there at SeanSpicer.com. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
If you enjoyed this
on the Sean
content, make
Spicer
sure
Show.
to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.